Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Dan's Models. This is John sitting here with Dan, and Dan, it doesn't really look like one of your models. What's going on here?
Well, this is a really old model that I had when I was a kid.
Is this a joke or something?
No. This is an old Rivarossi N-Scale 040.
Yes?
And I brought it because I want to see if I can revive it. Because, well, there's a couple things wrong with it. One, it has electrical pickup issues, and I'm not so concerned about that yet. But the other problem is that it still has its original motor, and I think the motor is about to die.
And what makes you think that?
Well, it just doesn't run very well. And sometimes it smokes. It doesn't have a smoke unit.
Oh,
but
it does now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like chunky or something. What?
Yeah, well, part of that's the electrical pickup problem.
Yeah.
But sometimes if the motor gets going long enough, it starts to smoke. Anyway, it smells really good too. What I have is this, which is a coreless can motor.
It looks kind of big. How's that going to fit in there?
Well, that's what I want to try to do. It should fit in the cab, or mostly fit in the cab. And I want to see if I can install that and make the thing run with that.
This might take a while.
Okay. So first thing I need to do is separate the engine and the tender, which is relatively easy. Just unscrew the drawbar.
I guess that's one thing about older technology like this. It's usually easy to work on, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. So that takes those apart. So the motor's held in by 4 little screws, so I have to take those out. So once the screws are removed, the motor will just pull out the back.
Oh, that is the motor.
Yeah.
You know, it actually looks like it is almost exactly the same size.
Yeah, that's why I got this motor. This is a Fallhaber, I think. I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation. But anyway, it's a coreless motor. And yeah, it's about the same size as this original motor. And it has the same size shaft. And I also liked it because the shaft is long enough that I can put the worm from this motor on this one, and it should work out to be about the same.
I think what was throwing me off was the fact that it has a shaft on each side.
Right.
But we only need the one side, huh?
Right. Eventually I'll have to trim this one down, but I'll leave that for now. Slight snag. The new motor doesn't quite fit in here.
Oh, it looked like it would. It looked like it was the same size.
It is almost, but these little places where the screws went into are just sticking out just a little too much for the motor to go in. So what I need to do is grind those down a little.
What, with a motor tool? Or?
Yeah.
I heard a lot of grinding.
Yeah. So I ground the inside of this thing a little bit, and now the motor fits in. It does stick out the back just a little bit, but so did the other one. So I don't think it's too big of a deal.
Okay. What's next?
Well, now I have to put the worm on the new motor. So I'm using a Northwest Shortline puller to remove the gear from the old motor.
Okay. So you're going to push on it to...
Yeah. The idea is that I apply force to the shaft and the gear is trapped, so it's going to come off as the shaft moves. The only problem is that none of the puller attachments I have are small enough to fit inside that gear, so I'm having to use basically a cut-in-half small nail as kind of an intermediate thing. So this is probably going to involve a lot of frustration. So
should I keep the camera going to record the cussing?
I don't know.
It's only through the miracle of video editing that we can be looking at this right now.
Right. Getting this little gear off the old motor was
a chore?
Yeah, you could say that. Unfortunately, I didn't take pictures. I ended up having to take it home and use several different tools to get it off the shaft and some inventive thinking.
People might think it's funny to know this, Dan, so I'm going to mention it. This is a few days later from that last scene.
Yeah.
Because we could not figure out a way here, right, to get this thing off.
Well, the problem is this is the attachment for my gear puller.
Uh-huh.
And this little thing is just a little too big to fit inside here, and the motor shaft was inside here, and it was very close to the end. And I tried putting like a piece of steel wire or something between this attachment and the shaft, but I couldn't keep it stable enough to make it work.
And the other ones we tried here the other day kept bending.
Yeah, I tried getting some little nails at the hardware store, like little tiny brads that you'd use to hang pictures or something, and cutting the tips off and sticking one of those in there and using that, and that bent.
Just bent.
Just bent. Everything I did either bent or just, went boop and didn't work. And because it was so shallow in there, because the shaft was so close to the end of the gear, it wouldn't hold anything steady.
Yeah.
And I just tried everything I could think of. I even had a special attachment that I'd made for some other project and put it on my little vise at home. And that didn't work either. So I didn't take any pictures, but I can kind of explain how I eventually figured it out. So this is the new motor, and I've just kind of stuck this on temporarily. But let's pretend it's the old motor for a minute.
Yes.
I'm going to recreate what I did. I noticed that, like here, there was a lot of space between the worm and the motor. Actually, there was not quite this much space with the old motor. But
right, this isn't pushed on, so.
This isn't pushed on where it needs to be. But there was some space here, and I thought, well, maybe if I can't shove the shaft this way, maybe I could shove it this way.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I took my motor tool with a grinder like this, and I ground the shaft down a little bit around the edges to make it slightly thinner. Then I took a cutting wheel and I cut it off right at the edge of the motor.
So that motor is totally useless. Well, I mean, it was useless anyway.
It was useless anyway. It was smoking.
Now it's really useless.
Yeah, I threw it away. That was the end of that motor. So then what I did was, then I just had basically, a gear with a piece of shaft sticking out. And now I put something behind the gear with a hole in it so that the shaft would have somewhere to go. And now I could shove on the shaft because I could get to it.
You could push it from the other direction, right?
So I pushed it from the other direction, and because I'd shaved it down, it wasn't tight when that end got in.
Mm-hmm.
So when the shaved down part of the shaft went into the gear, it wasn't tight anymore, and then it was easy to get the gear off. But that's what I had to do.
What a pain.
It was. It was a real pain. And now I need to press the worm onto the new motor. And the way it works is when the motor is all the way in as far as it can go, the worm needs to be right about here. Way at the end of this little channel that's in the bottom, because that's where the gear is that turns the wheels.
Okay.
So I need to press it far enough onto there so that it ends up in that spot.
So what, can you mark it, or how do you do this? Just press a little bit and then test it, and press a little bit and test it?
Yeah, it actually turns out that it's about not quite all the way on.
I guess we'll see.
But it's far enough on to be stable, so it should work fine.
So here's a question. What can you use that little gear puller thing to press that on? Or
unfortunately, no, because this motor is too long to fit in the gear puller. So you can either use a vise or like a C-clamp will work. So I think that's what I'm going to do since we have a C-clamp here. So this is what I'm doing. It's kind of crude but effective.
This is making me nervous.
Just very gently push the motor into the gear.
Oh.
And then I'm going to release it and then test it out and see if it's far enough. And if it's not, I may have to push it some more. So now I've got the gear on the motor, and it fits in.
Looks like it works.
Yeah, right where it's supposed to. The only thing I've noticed is if the motor's not in exactly the right spot, I hooked up some test leads to it, and it makes a little noise because I think the gear is rubbing on the inside of the engine. So I'm going to take a grinder attachment and just enlarge the inside a little bit.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Just in case anyone's curious, this is a Faulhaber 1516 L012S motor.
Fall what?
Faulhaber.
Halber?
Faulhaber or something. I don't know. I'm not sure how you say it. Anyway, there's also numbers on it, R40 and 4814. So
whatever that all means.
Yeah, I think the 1516 refers to the size, 15 millimeters by 16 millimeters.
Oh.
Not sure about the rest of it, but anyway, if you want one of these, that's what it is. And it has a 1.5 millimeter shaft, and obviously it's double-ended.
Yes.
So this is almost ready to go. All I need to do now is to actually mount it inside the engine.
What, don't you have to cut off that back post too?
Eventually, yeah. But I want to make sure it's really going to work before I do that. I figured out that the motor needs to be pushed against the floor of the cab rather than up toward the roof, because if it's too far up to the roof, it'll rub. The worm will rub and it makes noise. So what I did is I have these little strips of plastic. These are HO scale 6x10 or 066 by 112 if you want it in inches. And I cut a couple of little strips and I'm just going to put them
so these
right in here like this.
They force the motor down toward the floor. Is that what you're doing?
Right. One's not quite in position. I want it one on either side of that little ridge that's in the middle. But yeah, it's going to push the motor down toward the floor and make it pretty tight in there also, which is a good thing.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, so I glued these in with some CA, and now the motor just will slip in, and I'll secure that with a little bit of silicone adhesive in case I ever need to remove it.
The motor?
Yeah.
Oh.
So one last thing before I install the motor, I painted the inside of the cab black just to make sure nothing shows.
Yeah, because those little white pieces might stick out, right? I mean,
yeah.
Or be noticeable on the side of it.
Probably wouldn't be noticeable too much, but just in case. And also there was some, silver spots where I'd ground the metal and stuff. So
yeah.
I painted all of that.
Well, it doesn't hurt. It only takes a second, so.
Right. So before I put the motor in, I'm going to put a little white grease on the worm.
Oh, it's kind of lubrication, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get to it, so I figured better do it now. And
ew. It looks like snot.
Yeah, this is clear silicone glue. I just want to use a little bit. I don't want to not use too much because I don't even see this, but there's little holes in the front of the motor. Mm-hmm. I don't want glue in there.
Yeah, that would suck.
Yeah. So now I can just push it in. And I left the shaft on so I could spin it just to make sure it's not rubbing. And it seems good. So now I can trim the shaft. I'm going to leave a little bit of a stub of this just in case I ever need it.
You can always paint it black.
Right.
It sounds like I'm at the dentist. Hey, you got it now, Doc. There it goes.
So now comes the real test. Put this back together and see how it works.
The real moment of truth.
So I hooked up some test leads and see what happens.
Yeah. Not only is it quiet, but it's a lot smoother and nicer than it was too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
See, but there's one problem though. This is still not a Dan's model because it has no DCC, it has no light, it has nothing.
Right. Well, we're going to do all that, but we're going to do all that on our N-Scale DCC installs video.
Oh, that's coming out sometime this year.
Yeah. So this is a little bit of a teaser. I thought the motor swap wasn't really necessarily part of the DCC install, so that's why we're doing it this way.
Aha.
And that way people can refer back to it if they already have that program and want to see how I did that.
Well, I guess we'll see this locomotive again on the DCC installation video then.
Yeah.